Hello and welcome to this meeting of the Planning and Development Council of the Town of Oakville. We have regrets this evening, obviously, from Mayor Burden. Clerk, do we have any additional regrets?
No, we don't have any additional regrets.
Thank you. Members of council, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Would two of you kindly move us into the committee of the whole? Councillor Alger and Councillor Lischina, thank you very much. Any opposed? Okay, so that is carried. There are no consent items on tonight's agenda. There are no confidential consent items. There is one public hearing item, and we have a presentation from our planner, Brandon Hassan. I would like to remind the public that if there is anyone watching the live stream of this meeting on oakville.ca and you wish to speak to this item, please call 905-815-6095 and we will connect you to the meeting. You will be called upon to speak following the registered delegations. Mr. Hassan, I'll call you to make your presentation.
Perfect. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you, Acting Mayor Palmer, members of council and members of the public tuning in tonight's meeting. This presentation is in relation to item 6.1 on tonight's agenda. This draft plan of subdivision application relates to the proposed development of the lands described as Block 263, Plan 20M 1212, as part of the Mattamy Pet Core Phase 2 subdivision. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to introduce the application to council and the public in order to obtain any further comments for review as it relates to this proposed application. No decisions will be made at this time. And as Acting Mayor Palmer had said, the number on the screen shows if you have any questions or wish to be a delegate in order to be queued into the meeting. Next slide, please. As seen on the location map, the subject lands are located on the north side of Settlers Road East between Vernon Powell Drive and Attorney Way, shown on the screen identified with the yellow star. Next slide, please. For those that are not familiar with the property, this is the lands. Next slide, please. Application. Great. Those.
Mr. Hassan, if you could just pause, we're having trouble hearing you.
Yeah, no problem. I'm hearing that too.
Okay, if you would like to proceed, we're just going to see if it's been resolved.
Okay, thanks. I can still hear it, but do you want me to just go through this slide again and we'll see if it continues?
Sure.
Okay. As seen in the proposed draft plan of subdivision on the screen, it depicts the proposed public land in 8 blocks, of which would be further subdivided by a part lot control application to create the proposed 32 townhome. To me, that sounded a bit better. I'm not sure if on your end that was all right. Okay, next slide, please. So as shown on the screen, this is a map of the North Oakville master plan. Oh, I hear it again. The subject lands again identified with a yellow star as part of the general urban area land use category. Next slide, please. This is a map seen on the screen of the town's community structure with the subject lands again identified with the yellow star, neighborhood 9. Next slide, please. Subject lands are designated neighborhood area as seen on the official plan map. Section 5124 of the Planning Act deals with criteria for considering a draft plan of subdivision. The official plan contains policies that deem a plan of subdivision the appropriate process for the development of land in most cases. And as specifically as it says on the screen, for this proposed development, which includes a public lane, where the extension of a public road is required or a new road allowance is required. And in this case, as I noted, the public lane triggers this policy provision. Therefore, it is necessary, as per the official plan policies, for the development of the subject lands to proceed by way of a plan of subdivision in order for the creation of the proposed public lane to occur prior to the 32 townhomes being built. Next slide, please. In regards to the zoning bylaw 2009-189 for North Oakville, the property was subject to an H removal application, which was approved this past January 2022 in order to remove the H17 holding symbol from the subject lands. This approval enabled the applicant to apply for this draft plan of subdivision application in order to create the proposed public lane and 8 townhome blocks, whereas only the uses noted in section 9.3.15.1 of the bylaw were permitted. And at that time, a mixed-use building, apartment, parking garage associated with both, and stacked townhouse dwellings were permitted. Next slide, please. In large part, and thanks to our transportation staff to getting this plan to me at the last minute, one of the items that was brought up through the review and at the public information attended by residents was on-street parking. So it's a little tough to read the legend. Obviously, it's blurry, but what I tried to do was color code the streets, wherein you can see that the green indicates where on-street parking is permitted, red indicates where on-street parking is not permitted, and in most situations, it's on one side of the street and then on corners of the units of Christopher Road and Stork Street. So that's just a little bit north of the subject lands. And if we can go to the next slide. So the orange arrow depicts the proposed public lane, which would cut across the subject lands. And as seen on the screen, again, it just shows in green where on-street parking is permitted. The red indicates where that is not permitted. And next slide, please. And the applicant as well, just this afternoon, was able to provide this concept plan indicating that the townhouse units would each have 2 parking spaces contained within the garage area, which is access off lane. And then there are, again, as I indicated on the previous slide, the on-street parking on the streets surrounding the property itself. Next slide, please. So public information was held virtually on January 10th, 2022. The applicant, 4 residents, and planning staff were in attendance. As identified on the screen, the main items and questions that came up were the type of housing being proposed, specifically related to the use of land for an apartment building at the time, the timing of the proposed construction, location for on-street parking, as I had noted, and amenity areas for the townhome units. And staff have identified similar concerns and have highlighted them in the matters to be addressed. Next slide, please. So again, as seen on the slide and noted in the staff report, the matters to be addressed are alignment with the climate emergency, confirmation with the owner and applicant being in good standing with the North Oakville East Developers Group and party to the cost sharing agreement, consistency with the provincial policy statement 2020 and conforming with the growth plan for 2020, conformity to the region of Halton official plan, conformity that the proposal and land uses comply with the North Oakville East secondary plan, evaluation of the proposed built form design and its suitability for the proposed site and subject lands, evaluation of the appropriateness of the proposed development, and as far as the proposed lane goes, its appropriate functionality and design, confirmation from the region that the applicant has secured sufficient allocation, and again, as I previously noted, review of the opportunities to provide on-street parking and investigate opportunities to maximize visitor parking for the proposed development. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, staff put forth the following recommendation as seen for council's consideration. And next slide, please. Again, the number is on the screen for any of those watching the live stream to phone in and be a delegate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hassan, for your presentation. Before we go to Councillor Sandhu, I just wanted to move back to the regrets item on the agenda. We do also have regrets from Councillor Sean O'Meara. Councillor Sandhu, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Councilor Palmer, or I should say Acting Mayor Palmer. Mr. Hassan, I have just a quick question about the townhomes specifically. Do we know at this time whether the townhomes will have basements or if townhomes generally have basements? I don't know the answer to that. I'm not an engineer.
Yeah. Through you, Acting Mayor Palmer, my understanding is that these will be slab on grade, and then the design and concepts are still being worked on by the applicant at this time. I don't have the conceptual elevations, but they may be in the package that the applicant has. And I think they're waiting online as well with their presentation.
I think my ask is specifically because we've indicated that these are going to be 2-car garage townhomes, and my worry is that half of that garage is going to go to storage if they don't have a basement, or maybe even more. So could we kind of note that from a staff perspective to ensure that residents have the ability to use the garages as they need to?
Yep, certainly I can note that and take a closer look at the floor plans when we report back.
Thank you, Councilor.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Councilor Lischina.
Thank you very much for the presentation. My question is about snow removal. If it's a public lane, are we moving the snow directly out of that lane completely because there's nowhere to put it? Is that how it works?
Yeah, through you, Acting Mayor Palmer, that would be correct. There is a similar lane configuration just to the north, I believe, off Stork Street. And I can acquire plans from our engineering group to see where snow storage would be stored in that area there, because this property is obviously further south and that snow would be stored in a different location.
Okay, yeah, that was my next question is, do we know where storage would be? That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Haslett-Theil.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Palmer. My question is just if the applicant has, I mean, I recognize they were on the Community Energy Task Force. Have they given us any details about whether or not there'll be EV charging stations as part of this townhouse? I note that the design of the townhouse is still under consideration, but is there an assurance that the width of that garage really will take 2 full-size vehicles?
Yeah, and through you, Acting Mayor Palmer, that's a very good question, actually. And I believe that would be considered a mechanical unit in terms of a charging station. So it may be an encroachment or encumbrance within the garage area. So that's something I can bring up with the applicant.
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Councilor Elgar.
Thank you. To you, Acting Mayor. A question to staff regarding the townhouse. You're saying it's slab on grade. And now when you say 2 parking spaces, you're talking 1 in the garage and 1 in the driveway. Is that correct?
Through you, Acting Mayor Palmer, are we able to pull up the slide deck again by chance and go to slide 11? It may show it, but not completely because it's not a colored. Yeah, so the lane itself, you can see there's a small portion of paving just above and below lane A. So that's like a small apron that enters into the garages. So the garages actually start right on the lane. So there's no driveway per se. You come off the lane and straight into the garages. And that's a similar configuration to the lane to the north.
And that garage is going to be 2 wide?
Correct. It's a double door.
A double door garage, eh?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And where's their parking for visitors?
So there's no required visitor parking specifically for the units. They're required to have 2 parking spaces within the townhouses themselves. And that's why I was able to pull up that plan that shows the visitor parking on street within the surrounding area.
Okay, so you park on somebody else's street. Got it.
On the public street, yeah.
Okay, are there any other questions? All right, so I will ask if there's a motion for the recommendation. Councillor Sandhu. Director Charles, have you updated the issues list?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The additional items that Council had listed was to provide some additional information on whether it's slab on grade or basements, provide some additional information on snow plowing and snow storage, and consider opportunities for EV charging equipment within the garages.
Thank you. Member of Council, we have a motion on the floor. Are there any opposed? Seeing none, that motion is carried. Okay, so we're moving on to discussion item 7.1. At this point, I would like to pass the chair to my colleague, Councillor Robertson, as this item is in the ward that I represent, and I do have some comments that I would like to make as well. So over to you, Councillor Robertson, Acting Mayor Robertson, should I say.
Thank you. We'll just share the wealth tonight. This is a recommendation report for the draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment by Cross Trail Estates Incorporated, Trafalgar Road Development Limited, and TWKD Developments Inc. It is concerning 406486 Burnham Thorpe Road East, and the report will be presented by Kate Coburn.
Thank you very much, Acting Mayor Robertson and members of council. As nicely highlighted there before you this evening is a draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by 3 partner developers, Cross Trail just getting some feedback. Cross Trail Estates, Trafalgar Road Developments, and TWKD Developments. The proposal before you this evening is a revised proposal, and the subdivision contains 212 residential units, which were formerly 232 units. It also includes a stormwater management pond, a partial school block, and a partial park block, which was not previously included. As mentioned, this report can be found as item 7.1 on tonight's agenda, and the purpose of tonight's meeting is to make a decision on the application before you. The applicant had held a public information meeting on October 24th, 2021, and the statutory public meeting was held on May 10th, 2021, and no members of the public attended either meeting. And it has taken this amount of time to coordinate this development with adjacent landowners to the south in order to proceed with the application at this time. Next slide, please. The subject lands is comprised of 3 lots, which are located on the south side of Burnham Thorpe Road East, just east of 6th Line. The lands currently are abut vacant lands to the south, which were previously subject to a draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment, which were recently approved in 2021. There are newly constructed residential uses to the east and to the north of this development, and a natural heritage block to the west of 6th Line. Slide, please. The proposal relates to the redevelopment of lands for the plan of subdivision, which provides for a number of items. This includes the extension of Post Road, which is the road located on the more easterly limit of this plan. And this is an extension of Post Road that would be occurring from the south to connect to Burnham Thorpe Road East. There is a new proposed east-west road noted as Street B on the plan, and this will connect 6th Line to Post Road. There is also a new public road noted as Street C on the plan, which will provide an intermediate connection between Burnham Thorpe Road and the new Street B. The 212 residential units are broken down, consisting of 52 street townhouse dwellings, and these are the dwellings found on the south side of Street B, as well as the east side of Post Road. And these are going to be accommodated as a freehold tenure. There are 160 townhouses proposed over 2 blocks, which are intended to be used as future condominium blocks. They include rear lane townhouses and back-to-back townhouse dwellings, and again, accommodated for or intended to be used for condominium usage. There is a stormwater management pond located at the southwest corner of the site. There is also partial blocks that you can see to include for Neighborhood 9 Park, as well as the future Catholic School Board block. The property is part of the approved 2020 regional allocation program. The on-street parking has been reviewed to maximize the number of parking spaces within the development. And this includes a combination of on-street parking and visitor parking as part of the future condominium development. And I'll discuss a little bit more about those features in the presentation. Road widenings are also required along 6th Line and Burnham Thorpe Road East. And it intended that both of these roads will be upgraded in the future. 6th Line is intended to be upgraded commencing later this fall. The subdivision will complete neighborhood 9 through this area, and as mentioned, provides neighborhood park and a block for future Catholic elementary school. Slide, please. The lands are located within the North Oakville East Secondary Plan, and the subject lands are designated as neighborhood area. Within the North Oakville Master Plan, the lands are further identified as general urban, neighborhood center area, and stormwater management facility. The North Oakville Master Plan illustrates a conceptual design commencing from 2008 for the development of the North Oakville East planning area. Deviations from the master plan have already been established with modifications to the road network. And this is why you would see that the road network proposed on the master plan figure in front of you is slightly different than what the proposed draft plan shows. And this is generally accommodated through the policy framework intended to ensure that the natural heritage system within the master plan area is properly delineated. So that has the effect of potentially changing or rerouting some of the road pattern. And this was the case for the natural heritage system that is to the southeast of this property. Revisions to the proposal have been made with respect to the configuration of a number of private roads and ensuring that lands were adequately sized for the park and school and stormwater facility. On this basis, it's staff's opinion that the proposed development conforms to and implements the North Oakville East Secondary Plan. Slide, please. With respect to zoning, I apologize, my existing zoning slide is slightly out of date. The existing zoning is now known as future development, was previously noted as existing development prior to our housekeeping amendment that was brought forward recently. And the future development zone permits legally existing uses. Currently, there are residential uses on the property. The proposed development would allow for, or proposal requests a rezoning from the future development to a variety of zones that are shown in the pink on the right-hand side of the screen. These include stormwater management facility, park zone, an institutional zone modified to match the institutional zone modified provided on the lands to the south for ensuring that the zoning is coordinated when these lands are merged. There is also a neighborhood center with modification 113 and general urban special provision 111 for the future condo blocks and 112 for the freehold tenure units on the south side. The modifications to the general urban and neighborhood center zoning proposed generally relate to the porches and window projections, which are similar to the surrounding zoning in the area. Additionally, to ensure that the development proceeds as proposed, the GU zone has further modification that will only permit townhouses rather than also allowing for single detached dwellings, which can be permitted in the GU zone. The proposed development complies with all other regulations within the bylaw, including the provisions for parking. The proposed zoning implements the modified proposal, and staff support the amending bylaw, which has been included as Appendix B of the staff report. Next slide, please. Over the next 3 slides, there were a variety of matters to be addressed that both staff and council had identified over the public meeting and through this previous staff report. This included confirmation that the applicant is in good standing with the North Oakville Developer Landowners Association, that there's consistency with the provincial policy documents, as well as regional and local policy documents, conforming and coordination with the draft plan of subdivision and master plan and the North Oakville East Secondary Plan, and as well as ensuring that changes in the configuration of Settlers Road and Post Road provided for adequate park block and school block sizes. There required to be a suitable outlet for the stormwater management pond, and ensuring that the development was appropriate for the intensity on private roads. Next slide, please. Also, the conformity with all the applicable urban design guidelines, the evaluation of on-street and visitor parking opportunities, completion of the EIR FSS, and the timing of the development related to the 6th line and Burnhamthorpe Road upgrades. Next slide, please. As mentioned, council had additional matters to be addressed, which included confirming the timing of the 6th line and Burnhamthorpe Road construction and parkland delivery, identifying timing of the school construction, identifying the use of the private condominium roads within the development, along with pedestrian facilities, and ensuring or evaluating whether a holding provision would be appropriate for the proposed development with respect to the infrastructure and roadworks proposed for 6th line. Staff are able to confirm that the applicant is a member in good standing with the North Oakville Landowners Group and that the proposal is consistent with the applicable provincial, regional, and local plans. Next slide, please. With respect to overall coordination and stormwater management, the developer has worked with the landowners to the south to better accommodate the appropriate school and park block sizes. The plan in front of you is a composite plan showing this park block broken down by three different parcels. The 2 parcels to the south are owned by the same landowner, the majority landholder, and a small portion from the subject lands will be conveyed as part of that park in its total. And similarly with the school in the purple on the right side, a portion of the school block lands will be conveyed from the developer to the majority landholder. And those lands will be provided to the school board as part of a contract. The school is anticipated to be developed for the 2024-2025 school year. Any opportunities for lay-by or kiss and ride facilities will be evaluated through future site plan applications for the school. The park design is currently underway with the developer to the south and town staff, and it may differ from the facility fit that is shown here today. But those discussions are still underway to determine the ultimate use and program for that park. Town staff and the school board will also coordinate for any shared facilities should those opportunities exist, and those will be further discussed through the site plan application for the school. The EIR FSS for the Upper West Morrison Creek watershed has advanced and has been approved, and it requires the completion of a stormwater management pond on the subject lands. And additional works progressing as part of the 6th line upgrades will also include stormwater management solutions in line with the approved EIR FSS, and this includes new culverts within the 6th line right-of-way. Construction and stabilization of the pond will be required prior to the registration of this plan, and appropriate conditions have been included in the draft plan conditions included in the report. Next slide, please. With respect to transportation and parking, the slide before you is the proposed parking plan, which shows on-street parking in the orange and the private parking shown in the yellow and blue. The yellow areas are the driveway areas for parking, and the blue is the garage area parking for the property. Just to highlight some of the overall transportation network, Post Road will have a right-of-way width of 22 meters and is classified as an avenue transit corridor. Post Road is also identified as a signed bike route in the North Oakville Trails Plan. The new roads proposed are local roads and will have a right-of-way width of 17 meters. The proposal has been revised to remove a number of access points into the future condo block from Street B. For instance, the previous plan did not demonstrate any on-street parking for Street B, and the revised plan now provides up to 32 on-street parking spaces along the north side of Street B. The proposed development will provide 2 parking spaces for each townhouse, where the bylaw requires a minimum of 1 parking space per unit. Additionally, the bylaw does not provide for a visitor parking standard for townhouse development. However, for the future condo block, the parking rate is proposed at 0.25 spaces per unit for a total of 40 visitor parking spaces for the condo development. Therefore, visitor parking is anticipated to be accommodated within the private condo road condo developments, as well as within the on-street parking area as shown on the plan. The design of rights of ways will require a balancing of a variety of items, which will include sidewalks on both sides, travel lanes, on-street parking, and the possibility of demarcation of bike lanes on Post Road. The developer will be responsible for the construction of these roadways and its facilities throughout the subdivision process to the satisfaction of the town. Under the proposed conditions, there will be up to 49 parking spaces that can be accommodated on street. And this also may be subject to change to better accommodate bike lanes or utility requirements and transit stops. Further, as mentioned, the number of private roadways have been reduced from the condo block, which will improve the streetscape and pedestrian environments along Street B and Street C. On this basis, it is staff's opinion that the proposed development will not present any negative impacts to design and function of the right-of-way, and it will be sized to accommodate a variety of transportation options. Additionally, the progress of the 6-line upgrades may require the town to enter the subject site, as well as other lands along 6-line, in advance of these lands being conveyed through the subdivision process. Through a previous report, a recommendation was provided, and council authorized staff to enter into agreements with landowners for the purposes of securing agreements to enter into lands to carry out these works. And it is possible that these subject lands will be part of that, and an agreement will be struck between the town and the landowner. Staff also evaluated the benefits of a holding provision, and it was determined that that would not be necessary given the current timing of 6-line advancing towards the fall of this year, and together with the opportunity for obtaining the necessary portions of right-of-way through that process. And as I said, it's estimated that those will begin in the fall. Slide, please. In conclusion, Acting Mayor, I put forth to you are the following recommendations for your consideration. And it is staff's recommendation that the applications be approved and bylaw 2022-29, amendment to zoning bylaw 2009-189 be passed. Slide. And these are a continuation of the recommendations that are found within the report. They include items 1 through 5. And at this time, I conclude, and if there are any other questions from council or the mayor, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. At this time, I'm looking for questions, and I see Acting Mayor Parmar's hand up, so I will turn the floor to her.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Robertson. Okay, so just for the benefit of my council members as well, in Ward 7, we typically don't have parking spaces for our parks. The parking is on street around the border of the park. So my question to Ms. Coburn, and thank you so much for that presentation, is where will the parking be for the neighborhood park? Because I assume it wouldn't be on 6-line. So is there another street that's more south that would accommodate that street parking, or would it be that street that we just saw in the diagram that you showed us?
Through you, Acting Mayor Robertson, if I can have the slide deck put up again, and I will just direct. If you could please go to slide. This would be slide number 9. So as you can see, the park is, it is a rather large neighborhood park, and it extends quite north from Settlers Road. So there is the expectation that on-street parking would be provided on Settlers Road. Additionally, I believe at the stage of the design that we are at for 6-line, there is proposed lay-by parking along 6-line frontage, and that will also be an opportunity for parking for park uses. Further to that, the design and facility program for the park has not yet been determined. So park staff are currently evaluating other alternatives and looking at the best use for this particular park with the community needs in mind. So the current facility fit prepared by the previous developer to the south had included a ball diamond. But it is not yet clear whether or not this will be a park for sports facilities, and rather than maybe perhaps a park for events or gathering, more passive uses.
Thank you. Yes, the reason I brought that up is because I know very well from the existing parks that usually all borders of the park are taken up the on-street parking is taken up during especially our summer months. Another concern I wanted to raise, and many of my colleagues have heard myself and Councillor Sandhu talk about this before, is that the root of our parking problems in the north, a large portion of the complaints and issues come from condominium roads because there's no parking available for visitors. And as we've discussed before, a lot of people use their garage as storage space, and parking just keeps on spilling onto other residential streets, and it just creates a problem for everyone. At this time, and I do recognize the work that has been done with the applicant and our staff, and I thank you for bringing the report forward today, but I cannot support the recommendation. And at the appropriate time, Acting Mayor Robertson, I would like to bring a motion forward to refer this application back to staff to explore ways to increase on-street parking opportunities through alternative design. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parmar and Councillor Sandhu.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Robertson. Just to kind of echo some of Councillor Palmer's comments, I think that our constant challenge, quite frankly, in Ward 7 is what our planned thought process is for what the ward is supposed to look like, or what our subdivisions are supposed to look like, and what the practical implementation ends up being. In theory, everything is great. Sometimes in practice, it doesn't come out the way that we want. And I applaud staff for taking the time to really kind of delve into these issues. And I see a continued demonstration of how hard staff is working to really kind of understand what council's direction and thoughts on that piece of practicality really are. So I thank you for that. I think my concerns are the same as Councillor Palmer's. I do have one kind of general question, and I'm not sure, Ms. Coburn, if it's for you or for Director Charles. Besides the deferral, what were to happen if we were to just deny this report? Like, what would happen next?
I'm going to defer that question to Mr. Charles, Acting Mayor, I don't know, Robertson, Parmar. I'm not sure who's Acting Mayor right now. I don't know. But I believe that Gabe might be available to answer that question.
Thank you for
Director
the question.
Charles, are you there?
And through the chair, if council decides to turn down the application, then my assumption is that the applicant simply would appeal that decision, take that to the Ontario Land Tribunal, and then we would have to we would at that point be trying to support council's decision. So the alternative is if there's a referral back to staff, we can certainly look at that.
And Director Charles, sorry, just a follow up to that. So if there were a denial and we were to send this to LPAT, what would be some additional implications? So when I'm looking at this area, it also encompasses a school. Will we be deferring that school by the deferral of this in any way?
Through the chair, what would occur is we wouldn't be able to acquire the lands that are necessary for the 6-line widening. We wouldn't be able to get the additional lands that are needed to complete the park. And subsequent to that, the school board would not be able to move forward in terms of the design of the overall school block if it doesn't have sufficient land to do that. So although, as Ms. Coburn said, the elementary school is not for a couple of years hence, they do their planning right now. They're right in the midst of that. So it does delay a substantial number of those key things that we're trying to acquire.
And does that happen with Councillor Palmer's deferral request, or in reference back to staff, or does that only happen if we send this to LPAT?
With the referral decision, staff can go back and continue to work with the applicant to find opportunities for additional parking. Our intent would be to bring this back to council as soon as we possibly can. I can't give you a firm date at this point, but it would give us that chance to continue to work through it with ideally with the opportunity to secure the lands that are in question.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that to staff. And thank you, Director Charles. Acting Mayor, I think Robertson, I'd be happy to support Councillor Palmer's and Acting Mayor Palmer's recommendation when the time is right. Thank you.
Thank you. We will hold that and listen to the rest of the questions. Councillor Elgar.
Thank you. To you, Deputy Acting Mayor. When I read the report, I see we're starting in a lot of reports, transit supportive development. What does Oakville staff say transit supportive development is in people per hectare?
Through the acting mayor to the councillor, that's a great question. I don't have those numbers on hand. It's definitely something we can get back to you, but generally speaking, the more density that you have in an area, the better that it would be transit supported. So in this particular development, for instance, as I noted in the GU areas, it does traditionally permit detached dwellings, whereas the applicant here has proposed townhouse dwellings, which would provide an increase in the density to better support transit usage in this area. And through the amending zoning bylaw, staff have ensured that the proposed development would proceed as proposed with townhouses only. They would not be permitted to reduce the density here to allow for detached dwellings in that instance.
But we don't have a number what transit supportive development means, what the density would be per hectare at this point in time.
Through the acting mayor, we do have those numbers. They do exist, Councillor Algar. I just don't have them handy.
Okay.
They are different for every area. So for example, along Dundas, the Dundas Urban Core, along Trafalgar, those density numbers will be at a higher value to support a certain type of transit. In the other areas, that number would be slightly different based on the classification of road. So we do have those numbers. I can get them to you. I just don't have them available right now. I don't know if there are other staff in the gallery tonight that might have something handy to share.
Okay, I appreciate that. Now, on the condition of draft approval, after what happened at the Saw Wet area where the school probably will never be built because the developer has an as of right to throw 40, 45, 49 houses in that location. I know in this one, it mentions number 20 dot M and then 13. School sites in this subdivision may eventually be converted to residential uses. Could that when you have that wording, what are you saying? Like there will be a school site for sure, or maybe not?
Through the acting mayor to the councillor, I believe you're referencing one of the draft plan conditions.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. And if I'm to understand correctly, that draft plan condition would also indicate the school board that would be providing clearance on that. I just don't have it on hand. But the school board may provide for opportunities if they want to divest themselves of this property in the future, for example. However, the zoning that's provided on the property through this application would not permit residential uses without a new zoning application being brought forward to the town for consideration. So it's not an as of right permission. The school board, I believe, is just indicating themselves that at some point in the future, they might not want this school there anymore, or they might not need this property for those reasons. But anybody who would want to develop it for something other than what this zoning would allow would have to come back to the town for that permission.
Okay,
and we
so
would
I guess
consider it on that time.
okay, so I guess the draft approval in this is quite different than what was approved for the Saw Wet School. Okay. Now, as the roads, are the roads town owned? Will they be given to the town, or do they remain condo roads inside the condo development?
So through the acting mayor to the councillor, the road, Post Road, Street A, Street B, and Street C, those are new public rights of way. Those roads will be built by the developer and then conveyed to the town as part of the subdivision process. The roadways that will be included in the two blocks opposite Street C, north of Street B in that area, those blocks will contain private roads, and that will be developed through a site plan application to determine, again, the appropriate configuration and what would be included, sidewalks, any kind of trees or vegetation that would be planted within that area. So this development includes a combination of public roads and private roads.
So in this application, when you get into the private roads, they would be the responsibility of the condo to plow those roads and not the town?
Through the acting mayor to the councillor, you are correct. Private roads, they will be managed through the condo board, and through the site plan process, it will also be determined whether or not they will receive municipal garbage pickup, or if they would have to do private garbage pickup, for example. So we need to ensure that they're at least designed to a standard that can accommodate those types of services.
Okay, and that hasn't been determined. That'll be at a later date, I guess. Which would
That
be
is
the similar. that for snow storage on the private roads, is there a place where that would happen? Is there a lot of developments, there's a place, okay, snow will be stored here, you know, but I don't see anything where you could possibly put that in this development.
Through the acting mayor to the councillor, you are correct. Through the site plan process, we will dive into those particular items. Snow storage is definitely one of those things that we have to deal with in our climate, and the applicant will have to demonstrate how snow removal will be accommodated within their development.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Kate.
You're welcome.
Councillor Lishchina.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the presentation, Kate. So I guess I'm trying to still figure out the park. If it's a children's playground area, that would be a walkable park. What I saw in that picture there was a baseball diamond, which would be teams driving to that park. So do we know what the actual use of that park is and how many parking spots along Settlers there are?
Through the acting mayor to the councillor, that is definitely something that staff are still working on. So as I mentioned, the plan that was brought up as part of my presentation is what's called a facility fit. And the developer provides that concept to the town to ensure that the certain types of facilities or programs can be accommodated within the size of that park. However, it's not set in stone through the review of the application stage. It's when it goes through the draft plan stage that the developer will work with the town park staff under Chris Marks' group to better refine what the appropriate use of that park will be. You might know that a heritage building known as the Bigger Barn will be relocated to this particular park. And there might be other facilities maybe such as tennis courts or basketball court, for example, that might be accommodated in this park. So it's, again, I'm not sure what other staff might be available to comment on the park, but to my knowledge today, the facilities and programs planned for the park are still being thought through.
But they will be limited based on what the parking situation ends up being. So do we know how many parking spots currently based on Settlers and 6 Line that you had mentioned?
Through the mayor to the councillor, we can look at the previous developments that were done to the south to look at what was intended to be accommodated on Settlers Road. The 6 Line work is through the town's project on 6 Line, and we will be evaluating the opportunity for the lay-by on-street parking there. So there are numbers that we could get for you, and typically parking is not generally accommodated within the neighborhood park areas, but I believe that that is something that we are evaluating, again, based on the nature and uses of this particular park. It's not clear that it'll be a ball diamond. So that's right. We're trying to sort out what is it going to be used for, what makes, and that's what Chris Marks' group will be evaluating.
But we'll almost make that decision for them if we go through with this, because you wouldn't be able to accommodate those type of people driving in from different parts of town. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Adams.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to help get clarity on the proposal that's being put in front of us with respect to a deferral. And I wondered if we could get some very specific wording about what's expected to come out of the deferral, so that council knows what's expected to be the outcome, the residents understand what's being pursued, and our staff know very specifically what the intended outcome is in terms of it coming back to council.
Councillor Parmar, can I let you work on that with the clerk while we continue questions?
Yes, we actually had it written out ahead of time. I can see if the clerk can email it to my colleagues. But again, it's being referred back to staff to explore ways to increase on-street parking opportunities through alternative design. So the goal is to get more street parking, whether they stick with this design or they pivot to something different.
Does that suit what you wanted, Councillor Adams?
Yeah, I think that would be okay. And if staff could be prepared to speak to the question about when that would return to council so that we can make a decision on the file and avoid any hearing process that we might want to try and avoid.
Thank you. Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you. My question is this, and I understand the detail with respect to parking, especially with parkland. And Councillor Chinna was almost there, hitting on the nose, is what the usage of that park will be will dictate what kind of vehicles will be arriving at that park. Needless to say, if it's soccer pitches or baseball diamonds and so forth, you're going to have vehicles coming into that park, because the way the booking procedures go with the recreation and culture is that you're not necessarily living in that specific neighborhood and that's your park. You could be anywhere in Oakville. So there will be challenges with that, and plus the private roads. My suggestion is this: that we've got the separate elementary school site adjacent to the park. So can we be a little bit creative and look at those two pieces of parcel and say up the middle we can add parking under a reciprocal agreement or reciprocal usage for parking for the school, potential school, and the park. We do have that in a lot of our agreements with the Halton District School Board or the Halton Catholic District School Board. So that might alleviate some of the issues I think PAV has with the parking. And I understand on-street parking is always is not the best way of doing things, but if we can be more creative to look at maybe a swath of the properties in between for parking, that would be my only suggestion. I would support the deference if this is looked at as one of the possible solutions for working with the developers and the town on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Adams anticipated my question. That was the clarification over the deferral, but I have a subsequent question that popped up as a result of Councillor Elgar's question on snow storage. And that is a little bit of backstory. I have a townhouse development in the ward that Councillor Grant and I represent that treats the site plan agreement and the agreement around specifically snow storage as a recommendation or a guideline as opposed to a rule. And every year we deal with the fact that the townhouse complex now under the operation of a management company basically ignores it and treats the fines as a cost of doing business. So the question that really, and it's a big issue around safety because there's giant snow mounds that get pushed over sidewalks, etc. So my question is this: is there any way to, within the subdivision agreement or any of the other agreements that can be negotiated with this developer or any other developer over snow storage, that there be some other kind of covenant that could protect against this inconvenience after the developer has gone home with their profits from that subdivision? I love the fact that Councillor Elgar is laughing because we've been doing it for years.
Through the acting mayor to the councillor. So there's definitely the opportunity to look at elements within the subdivision agreement for the overall site, as well as the subsequent site plan agreements. I apologize for the background noise. But in looking at those particular items as well as part of the site plan application, I think it was alluded to looking at specifically specific designated areas for snow removal. This is also intended to be a condominium development. So I don't know if that's the same as the one you're dealing with if it's a rental.
No, it's exactly the same. It's a condominium, and that's part of the problem because the management company doesn't have a relationship or didn't negotiate the original agreements. And so they're basically saying, we can't do anything about it. So, what are you going to do? Sue us? And then we write them another ticket.
Understood. So again, those are both the tools that we would have available. And I think that through this and hearing your comments, we'll be sure to look at that a little bit more closely in terms of what those mechanisms will be and ensuring that there's adequate locations for appropriate snow storage within the site.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for noting that.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Knoll. Councillor Haslett-Beal.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Robertson. I'm going to support a deferral. I do have a question about the basements. It came from Councillor Sandhu's earlier comments this evening. Are all of these on slab?
Through the acting mayor to the councillor, it is my understanding that all of the units within this proposal do have basements. I do know that the applicant's representative is on the call, and perhaps they can provide some further details as to what that looks like. That the product they're proposing here does anticipate to have a basement. The townhouse units that are within the condo area are proposed at 3 stories. They would have the parking at grade and then the 2 residential levels above. But they have indicated that basements would be accommodated. So I'm not sure if there's an opportunity or if you'd want further clarity to ask the applicant who's on the call.
No, that's helpful. I wonder how many of the developments are on slab, and if that is a factor in our parking dilemma that continues to crop up. And I know that we're awaiting a townwide parking management study, but it seems to me that it's a design flaw that's exacerbating a problem until we can get to a transit-oriented community, which seems to be still a fair ways away. But I will support a deferral, and I thank the councillors for suggesting it.
At this time, I see no further questions. I would like to ask if Councillor Parmar would like to put her deferral as the key motion in this.
Yes, I move to have that deferral. Sorry, it's a referral back to staff to explore ways to increase on-street parking opportunities through alternative designs.
Councillor Adams, can you help with any clarity in terms of the way we should do this at this point?
Well, I think this is perfectly in order. I just wondered if our staff could comment on 2 things. First of all, what they view as the opportunities for it, for the increased parking, and second, the timing for it with respect to recognizing the need for speed and urgency.
Through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor. In terms of the timing, the absolute earliest we could potentially come back to council would be June. That would, of course, be contingent on being able to have some successful conversations with the applicant, which we will pursue post haste. And that will look at all of the opportunities in this area. As Councillor Chisholm had pointed out, we do have reciprocal agreements with the school boards, which we can explore further and elaborate more when we do report back to council.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you. I guess that's for clarity's sake, and just maybe a friendly amendment to the motion. It's more than just street parking. Just as maybe you can fix the wording on it, but increase parking opportunities through alternative designs. It's not necessarily just going to be looking at the street, be looking on site parking too. So I don't know how you want to word that, but I'll leave it up to the experts to come up with that. If you don't mind, Pav, on that friendly amendment.
Councillor Chisholm, just to clarify, do you mean parking like on site of the potential park itself? Like that there would be a parking area on that in that park?
Yeah, whatever the terminology is, but looking at parking on site between the school site and the park itself. So it's not just on-street parking. We're looking at being creative in another way with respect to parking on both sites. And see if that, I just want to make sure we're not just dedicated to on-street parking, but looking at every possible design.
Councillor Parmar?
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Can we just go back to our director and ask him if he would need that additional amendment, or if the current verbiage is suffice and he knows to include that. Councillor Chisholm, I just want to make a comment, and we'll probably have more discussions on this later, but we're experiencing parking issues with many of the schools in Ward 7 in itself. There's not enough parking for staff on weekdays, so I don't know how this will be intertwined. Of course, if it's available for weekends and evenings, that helps, but the issue is still presented during the day. And I'm handing it back over to you, Director Charles, if this is suffice, and you can just look at Councillor Chisholm's request in your discussions with the applicant.
Through the chair, what I could offer to council, if it would be of benefit, is at the tail end of the referral recommendation to suggest refer to staff to explore ways to increase on-street parking and other parking opportunities through alternative designs.
Perfect. I'm fine with that.
I'm okay with that as well.
So we have a motion. Do we have a seconder for this motion?
We do not need a seconder. We are in committee of the whole.
Thank you. And then at this point, does anyone have any objection to the deferral? Then at this point, I declare that passed. And I hand things back to Councillor Acting Mayor Parmar.
Thank you. Okay, so that brings us to our next item, which is a report of the Ontario Housing Affordability Task Force and implications for Oakville. Available for questions, we have our Commissioner of Corporate Services, Nancy Sully, and Commissioner of Corporate Services and Treasurer, Nancy Sully. We have Commissioner of Community Development, Neil Garb, and we have our Director of Planning, Gabe Charles. Are there any questions from Council? Councillor Giddings?
Thank you. Through you, I had a few questions on the delegation process. The new bylaws have been prepared to address requirements from the Ontario Heritage Act, which was updated last year through the More Homes, More Choices Act. So how does the update change the previous bylaw in terms of the types of alterations that would be suitable for staff delegation?
Acting Mayor Parmar, that's a good question. We could hold that question to the next report if that's acceptable to the councillor and talk about it in the context of the Heritage Delegation Bylaw.
By all means.
Thank you. We'll move to Councillor Elgar.
Thank you. Through you to staff, regarding the timelines and the red tape reduction, the zoning amendments where, 90 days, if you don't get the zoning done within 90 days, 50% of the charge gets returned. If it's 150 days, 75% of the charge gets returned. If it's 210 days, you have no charge at all to build them. But similarly with the site plan work, like 60 days, you use 50%. Neil, what is that going to do to the town staff?
Thank you. Through you, Acting Mayor. We're going to do a complete analysis of those proposals, but it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that we wouldn't be covering our costs. It'd be extremely difficult to achieve any of the timelines that are proposed in the draft legislation, which would present a somewhat of a dilemma whether we would bring forward a report because we don't have any information. We'd recommend a refusal, just because we don't have the opportunity to fully analyze the information that's coming in. So it is a big question. There are huge impacts, and we look forward to bringing back a complete report at council at the end of April.
Okay, that's I guess, yeah, because this report is kind of like that we have here. It's kind of out of date already, but now you have more information. So at the end of April, we're going to have a lot more information then coming to us.
Through Acting Mayor, yes. So the province has set a deadline for the end of April for comments from the municipalities. So we'll bring back a report for council's consideration on the 25th of April.
Wow, I can't wait for that report. I thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Algar. Next, we have Councillor Knoll.
Excuse me. Thank you, Acting Mayor. I just wanted to first of all ask, was there a presentation or a summary of this report available? I asked that not wanting to unnecessarily extend the meeting, but I know that there are members of the public who are watching tonight that are keenly interested in this issue. And I would hate to gloss over the opportunity to have that. I'm hearing myself twice. It's bad enough to hear myself once. I would hate to miss the opportunity to provide more information for not just for council, but for members of the public who may be tuned in looking for information. So is there a summary report that may be presented, or is that something better left until the analysis of the legislation comes forward?
Through you, Acting Mayor, to the councillor, we hadn't planned on a comprehensive or an overview report just because the information is dated, but we will do a thorough presentation for council at the end of April.
Okay.
And I hope for information, there's a good summary in the Appendix B of the previous recommendations. Of course, as you point out, the caveat is they are somewhat stale dated now.
Yeah, I recognize that, and oh, there it goes again. Am I singular now? I am singular again. So I appreciate that. I accept that. I will move on with that. I just have a couple quick comments, Acting Mayor Parmar, with respect to this report. And I know many of you share this opinion, and we had the fairly lengthy conversation about this at Halton Region. But this report, and even for that matter, for the most part, the legislative tools that have been proposed to the Assembly really fall short in a major way. The task force, in my opinion, was constituted based on a false supposition. A false supposition that this is simply that's impossible to speak over. Is it? Oh, there we go. It is based on a false supposition that the housing affordability issue is simply a matter of supply and demand. And I think that everybody, everybody outside of the developer / real estate / banking sector would acknowledge that, which leads to another comment that, and I know that the mayor has mentioned this and others have mentioned it as well, that the task force itself was constituted of a fairly prejudicial group of participants and did not include municipalities. It did not include anybody from the federal government that has responsibility for housing through CMHC. It did not involve NGOs that are out there every day slogging in the field for affordability issues, et cetera. So I'm terribly disappointed with where this has come today. And, I'd be very interested to hear staff's suggestions with respect to the legislation. I mean, I think one of the more alarming things that is here is not only does it not really resolve any housing issues or affordability issues, in my opinion, but it literally rips the democracy out of the planning process by shortening windows and jacking up fees. And there's just so many anti-democratic, anti-public involvement tools that have been placed in this thing, or that have been recommended by the task force, that those by themselves almost discredit the entire document, in my opinion. So anyway, I look forward to the further presentation when the actual legislation has been analyzed. I look forward to hearing the feedback from other municipalities and other groups that will comment on this going forward. But the one thing that I'm hoping that the province can do eventually at some point, and that is to detangle the terminology so that we can be dealing with this issue on a level playing field. And one of it's probably the simplest part of this to solve, and that is, let's stop calling the entire basket of goods here affordable housing. We need to break it into two pieces: affordability and non-market / subsidized housing. They're two very distinct issues, and unfortunately, because they get commingled in these reports and in people's minds, it's very hard to delineate what is which piece of this is attacking which issue. I would hope that at some point we can stop using that catch-all term affordability, because affordability means different things to different people. And for folks on that end of the spectrum that have financial challenges, the affordability isn't whether you're paying $500,000 or $1.5 million. It's whether you can afford the $80 subsidized rent in a Halton Community Housing Corporation home, or living in a shelter. So we need to, at some point, and I'm hoping that maybe this recommendation can come forward from the municipality in due course, and that is, let's actually clarify what the nomenclature means. With that, I don't actually have any questions, just some comments, and I appreciate the time to express them. I look forward to more discussion about this as we move forward.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Knoll. Councillor Haslett-Thiel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Palmer. Well said, Councillor Knoll. I only have 3 comments, and they're not the overriding one, because everybody will generally cover those off quite well. And we're having another discussion tomorrow, and then we will get a secondary report later in April. A couple things that I haven't heard the public or others talk about a lot is it's a bit distressing to hear about a single egress out of a building when we're talking about disability and safety. And that seems to be an okay thing for people to put in the building code. So I'm wondering if our Chief Building Officer will comment on that in the future report. Does that recommendation speak with safety in mind and respect for those that will have difficulty getting in and out of different types of buildings? The other that is, again, not mentioned a lot, but seems a pretty weak weapon in the toolkit, and that is that, going back to a developer, and unless there's extraordinary circumstances, if they haven't built in 3 years, removing their allocation. I'm just a bit baffled by that. I mean, they are holding up supply. They know they're holding up supply. And they're not talking about penalties or fines. They're just talking about holding up their allocation, which is serious. But if they were intent on building, they probably would have wanted to get going. So they're doing something else. And I don't think the tool in the toolkit is doing what it needs to do to get supply to market. And that's not to suggest in any way that that's the only solution there. And my last comment is, I'm a bit concerned when I saw on number 9 that the staff report actually said that staff offered a qualified support for the comment about as of right zoning of 6 to 11 stories with no minimum parking requirements on streets utilized by public transit. I note the caveat that's there, and it came up at a council meeting earlier, I think by Councillor Adams as well, that buses do go through our communities, but it's also the way the staff has written this paragraph is concerning to me. There's a difference between having thoughtful local planning and a discussion about gentle density. To have in any way this as of right seems to me to go by far beyond anything that we should be agreeing to. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Councillor Haslett-Thiel. Councillor Adams.
Thanks very much. I think we've had a lot of good discussion on this topic, and I know that this council is going to have more good discussion on this topic. And tomorrow morning we have a special council meeting dealing with our own version of a task force for housing and the issue of assisted housing or affordable housing, as Councillor Knoll mentioned. I know that Councillor Knoll was for many years the president of HCHC, and I'm now holding that spot. And so the issue of assisted housing versus affordable housing is an important distinction. And the motion that we're considering tomorrow at the special meeting does actually cover both ends of that spectrum. And the one thing that I don't think we've really talked about is what's coming over the next few years, potentially, where the province is intending or wants to, I'll call it, drip out new policies every year. and putting us in a position where we will be forever responding to potential changes to planning or official plan designs or zoning changes that are going to come up. And I wondered whether staff in their reporting back to us could suggest a technique to try to put this issue more firmly to bed all at once, so that we aren't in a position where we're having to open up our official plan or zoning every year to respond to changes to the provincial planning process. I understand if they want to have us plan for additional housing, extra units, even if there's no extra population that comes with them necessarily, that's one thing perhaps, but to make us open up our plans constantly is an incredible amount of churn for our staff and ourselves and our community to deal with. And I think that needs to be addressed as part of this discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Commissioner Garb, is that request from Councillor Adams acceptable to you?
Through you, Acting Mayor, yeah, we'll endeavor to address all of the issues that Council has raised in a comprehensive way. And to Councillor Adams' point, I'm 30 years in the profession, and I think this is a routine occurrence when the province changes the Planning Act, things trickle down. And your suggestion is the right one. If we can get ahead of it with a comprehensive view to how to address housing affordability and some of the other land use planning matters ahead of time, that is always advantageous, and we'll keep that in mind as we report forward at the end of the month and going forward.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councillor Robertson.
My question deals with the penalties municipalities will have if they don't get the zoning and they don't get all of the planning work, the site work done on time. How many staff would we have to hire in order to ever handle what we currently have come into this town to meet those deadlines?
Through you, Acting Mayor, our resources at the town is one aspect of it. There's also the quality of submission that's on the other side, and I think that's quite often lost, because we could have 200 staff dedicated to the approval process, and if the applicant doesn't produce a quality report, then that seems to be what's being proposed. It'll be our responsibility regardless. So there's some questions still surrounding that particular piece of legislation, and we'll try to address that comprehensively for the end of the month.
Thank you, because I think that's one of the biggest things that I found in it is that we're penalized for something that is beyond our control. And I would like that to be noted.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you. This is a question for Neil. Neil, understanding our municipality is taking the bull by the horns on this, and we're going to have a further discussion with respect to what our position is on all these, I think, 55 recommendations. Are we a standalone on this, or is this something that we'll work with in partnership with the region and our other municipalities within the region to develop formalized response? Or are we doing this on an individual basis, municipality by municipality?
Through you, Acting Mayor, to the Councillor, our intention is to coordinate as much as possible with our other municipal partners. We'll be in Halton region, we're especially good at sharing information and trying to, if we're not completely synced, we're in alignment with each other, and we'll be working with our municipal partners, including the region, on our response.
So I guess just the mechanics of the process. If once we put in our response, our rebuttal, whatever the case may be, would that be under the region title, or is that be under Town of Oakville?
So through you, Acting Mayor, my thought is that we need to respond as the Town of Oakville. we can, it will add another voice to the commentary. We will be in alignment with the region, but my feeling right now is that we need, as a council and as a municipality, to express our own individual voice. It may be the same as others, but it will add strength, I think, when we respond as a whole consistently, but as individuals as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. Oh, sorry to cut you off there, Ray. I saw that our CAO has joined as well to perhaps add some additional remarks to that.
I was going to add to, thank you, Acting Mayor. I was going to add, Councillor Chisholm, that the coordination, as Neil said, is certainly with the region and the other municipalities. There is a limited amount of time for us to provide comments. I think they've asked for comments, I think, Neil, by the end of the month, April 30th. So that creates the difficulty for that joint reporting. But I would say to you that the Ontario Big City Mayors on the CEO's group that support that group, as well as a group of GTHA mayors and commissioners and planners, have been coordinating quite extensively on the housing question. And we're actually, from the municipal perspective, quite aligned in our concerns with the housing task force recommendations.
Thank you, CAO. Is that everything, Ray?
Yeah, fine.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, so do we have someone to move the recommendation? And I just want to point out that there are changes in clause 1 and clause 2 to reflect the correct title of the report. So you may have noticed that. And I'll look for someone to move. Councillor Adams, thank you. So members of the council, we have a motion on the floor. Any opposed? Seeing none, this motion is carried. Okay, so that brings us to our next item, 7.3, Heritage Delegation Bylaw 2022-021. Is there any discussion on the item? Is there a motion for the recommendation? Councillor Haslett-Theo? Any opposed?
No.
Oh, sorry.
Acting Mayor, I do have a couple comments, but I believe Councillor Giddings wanted to speak on this in regards to delegation. So I'm going to defer to him just because he made a comment earlier.
Thank you. Councillor Giddings, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Janet. This came through the More Homes and More Choices Act through to revision of the Ontario Heritage Act last summer. And I desire to improve customer service and the perception of heritage, I think is what it said in the report, by reducing wait times. My concern is whether there'll be any applications delegated that may come as a surprise or to the heritage area in terms of the built, if it will deal with built form or heritage features.
Thank you, Councillor Giddings, for your questions. I see that Ms. Shepherd has joined us, if she would like to respond.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. To the councillor, I don't believe that the changes that have been proposed to the delegation bylaw will significantly, I guess, change what we've been able to approve previously under the delegation bylaw. I think the wording is improved, but in terms of drastic changes to things that the community would be particularly interested in, I would just note that, say, like we've had questions about what happens if a change is being proposed to a heritage attribute, and that can be in the heritage district or on an individually designated property. And generally the response is, if it's going to be removing covering or altering a heritage attribute in any kind of way that's going to negatively impact its cultural heritage value or remove its heritage value, it still needs to go to the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee for review and then to council for approval. So honestly, I think that the language is really designed to kind of provide a bit more clarity, and that will improve our customer service by by letting people know exactly what we can be approving under the delegation bylaw. But there are still obviously quite a few things that will need to go through Heritage Oakville and to council for final approval, because staff will not be approving changes to heritage attributes.
Thanks, Susan. On page 100 of the agenda, there were 5 bullets of alterations that will not be delegated. And it talks about number 5 was alterations with significant impact. The question that can be raised is, what's significant? Is that
Councillor Giddings, you just cut off there at the end.
Sorry, Acting Mayor, to the councillor, I don't have a hard copy of the agenda in front of me, and my computer has decided to freeze while I'm trying to actually open that report. But
if I could, it talked about would remain minor in nature, and that alterations with significant impact on cultural heritage value. So it's one of the questions that has come up previously in terms of how do we define significant?
I don't believe there is a firm definition of significant within the bylaw itself. However, generally staff would determine something to be significant when it is directly impacting the heritage attribute. And so, for example, a non-significant change could be something like changing the paint color of an already painted building, whereas a significant change would be removing a heritage attribute like a historic window or a historic door. So, one thing I'd say would be considered reversible. That would be the paint color. Well, the other would not be reversible because that is the actual removal of a heritage attribute and the destruction of heritage materials.
I appreciate the details. Last question is, with the coming Old Oakville Heritage Conservation District Plan update coming later this fall, how will these reports be a part of that process?
So, the update to the Old Oakville Heritage Conservation District is a fantastic opportunity for us to receive more community input on how things are working within Old Oakville and how we can improve on them. We can always come back to council with changes to any of these documents, both in the Heritage Documents Report and in the delegation bylaw, if there is determined to be a need through a need for change through that process. For now, though, I would say that the improvements provided both in these documents and the delegation bylaw actually provide additional protection and updated legislated resources to the Old Oakville area. But again, as I say, as we continue to receive more feedback, we can always come forward with updates as needed. And an additional thing that's also required through updating Heritage Conservation District plans is also a category of exempted actions that are written right into a Heritage District plan. This is a requirement of the Ontario Heritage Act. And so I'm quite confident that discussion of any exempted items will lead to discussion of how do we deal with delegated items moving forward, and ensuring that changes and alterations within the Heritage District that are going to have a serious change to heritage character and materials are appropriately dealt with through Heritage Oakville review and council approval.
I appreciate the details. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Giddings. Councillor Haslett-Theo, would you like to add to that?
Thank you, Councillor Parmar. First of all, let me just comment that it's very clear that Susan you cherish our heritage conservation plan, and it always inspires me that how much you pay attention to the detail. I only have one additional comment, and that is just to confirm that if in fact the residents had concerns about a heritage application or change, does the delegation bylaw still provide the right for council to ask the issue to be brought to council versus being dealt with through a delegation? I believe I saw that but I wanted just a confirmation.
Yes, through the acting mayor to Councillor Haslett-Thiel, it does allow us to bring matters forward to council and Heritage Oakville in that public forum for both of those places. Additionally, I mean, it doesn't change anything in that staff are still also not allowed to refuse an application. And so if there's something that comes forward that we don't feel that we can support, it is also required to go through Heritage Oakville and then to council. But when something comes up that is of significant interest to the community, council of course retains that right to ask that it come forward to them.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. So that is being moved by Councillor Haslett-Thiel, and I will seek if there are any opposed. Okay, seeing none, that motion is carried. So we're moving on to item 7.4, which is heritage document updates. Is there any discussion on that item? Councillor Haslett-Thiel, your hand is up. No question from her. Okay, anybody else? Okay, is there a motion for the recommendation? A mover for the recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Sandu. Any opposed? Okay, that motion is carried. That brings us to item 7.5, Bronte Cemetery Cultural Heritage Evaluation Report. Is there any discussion on the item? Okay. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you. I have one question. When the part of the report that said there are current signs on it, and they're amazing signs, and the report is great, the history is amazing to it. I love walking through that cemetery. Is it possible, if it's designated as a heritage, that we could ever add a sign to do an Indigenous acknowledgement as the original stewards of the land prior to it becoming a pioneer cemetery?
Through the acting mayor to Councillor Robertson, definitely. Heritage staff have actually been working with Parks and Open Space staff on kind of updating and bringing forward new heritage plaques. And I think that's a wonderful idea, not just for the Bronte Cemetery actually, but for a number of other cultural heritage landscapes, especially that the town has been working at conserving over the past few years. So thank you very much. That's an excellent suggestion. I'll make sure that that it's shared with the Director of Parks and Open Space as well.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Any additional questions or comments? Okay, is there a mover for the motion? Councillor Robertson, thank you. Any opposed? Okay, and that carries. Okay, so that brings us to our next item. There are no confidential discussion items. Item number 9 brings us to our advisory committee minutes. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Dedek, thank you. Any opposed? So that carries. Thank you. Okay, I'll now look for someone to provide a, to move that I rise and report to council. Councillor Longo. Thank you. So that's carried. Is there any objection? Sorry. Okay, seeing none, that's carried. I rise and report that the Committee of the Whole has met and has made recommendations on public hearing items 6.1, discussion items 7.1, 7.2, 7.3, 7.4, and 7.5, and advisory committee minutes item 9.1 as noted by the clerk. Do we have a mover? Councillor Chisholm, second by Councillor Knoll, that the report and recommendations of the Committee of the Whole be approved. Any objections? So that's carried. Okay, I now turn to council for any matters of new business. Councillor Sandhu?
Thank you, Acting Mayor Parmar. A few matters of new business. Actually, I firstly wanted to say happy early Easter to everyone who is celebrating. Also, a happy early and current Navratri to our Hindu community here in Oakville. A very happy Ramadan to our Muslim brothers and sisters here in the town of Oakville. And also a very, very happy Sikh Heritage Month for the month of April. It is a time of celebration for the Sikh faith and a time of remembrance for all those in front of us who have done so much to make sure that we have this melting pot of Sikh excellence here in not only Oakville, but also in Canada. So I thank all of you who have come before us. I also wanted to say a happy early Vaisakhi. Vaisakhi Dia Lakh Lakh Vidanya. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sandhu. There's much to celebrate this month. Councillor Knoll?
Who knew that April would be this busy? Congratulations, everybody. I just wanted to bring some sad news, actually. I'm sorry after that to bring us down a level. But on behalf of the Halton Police Board, I'd like to recognize the unfortunate and sudden passing of one of our special constables, Mr. Steve Skilton. He was one of our prisoner transport constables, and he passed away after a long battle with cancer. We recognize and remember his great service to the people of the region of Halton, and we want to pass along our condolences to his friends and family, and of course to his colleagues that worked alongside with him. So rest in peace, Special Constable Skilton.
Thank you, Councillor Knoll, for sharing. Okay, so that brings us to item number 12, consideration and readings of the bylaws. I'm looking for a mover and seconder for the passing of the bylaws, excluding bylaw 2022-029, which was referred back to staff. Okay, moved by Councillor Elgar, seconded by Councillor Lischina. Are there any opposed? Seeing none, the bylaws are carried. And look at that. We finished on great time. So I'm looking for a motion to adjourn the meeting. Councillor Haslett-Deal, thank you very much. Need a seconder for that. Oh, okay. And we didn't need a motion for that. Thank you anyways, Councillor Haslett-Deal. Thank you everyone for not being too hard on me tonight. It was a pleasure to see all of you and looking forward to seeing you all soon again. Good night.
Well done.
Thank you.
Is it too late? Is it too late to challenge the chair?
Yes, it is.
We're adjourned.
Sorry.
Have a good night, everyone. Bye.